Okay, so welcome back from Thanksgiving break. 2 weeks left of actual class, and then finals week, and that's it. So you're coming down to the end. Yeah, I have to remind you it's my job, right? So remember that, number one, the final is December 11th, which is Monday. So you're done early in this class, and then you can freak out about all your other stuff. Okay? Unless you have 220, in which case you freak out about that at the same time, and then you're going to sleep amazingly well on Monday night, right? See, it all works out. I remember those days when you got to do that sleep after your studio. It was great. Anyway, so I'm going to continue right along. I'm going to do the section line drawing today with the rendering. It's entirely possible at this stage in the semester that you won't necessarily do whatever it is I'm doing today in class because you're working on something that you're, sorry. You're working on something, some other drawing or some other rendering or whatever because you obviously are trying to get ready for the final. So if we get to the end of today and you haven't done the line drawing, the line section drawing for 230, at least post whatever you were working on today as your exercise 230. Does that make sense? So you did a rendering and it was a daytime rendering, okay? And you worked on that all day today. Still post it as your exercise 230. So you get credit for exercise 230, even if you don't do what I suggest that you do as part of today, okay? I'm going to do the section today, and then I'm going to try to figure out what to do with the remaining 3 lectures of class. So we obviously have one on Wednesday, then we have Monday, and then we have next Wednesday. I know you guys need a lot of time to work. I will probably give you time to work in those, but I will probably also do some Photoshop collaging or whatever, just so you can see how it all kind of weaves together. Maybe the Z-depth channel and how that works or something like that. So still to be determined. You guys know what you need to do, so obviously concentrate on what it is that you need to do when you get to the exercise part of the class. Remember, as part of the final, that you need 4 renderings: interior, day and night; exterior, day and night. That's 4 renderings. And then you also need, I should double check here, at least 2 drawings. I think it's 2 drawings. Either plan, section, elevation, 2 of those 3. So I should have 6 11 by 17 prints from each of you. If you did more renderings, by all means, give me more. There's not a problem with excess, but those are the minimums. And you guys have had enough grade sheets back to where you know if you fail to turn in one of those 4, you're going to just drop that percentage down. Does that make sense? So make sure that you turn in at least 1 of each of those. And don't give me 4 daytime renderings because I'm very specific. I want those 4 in those categories. So if you don't meet one of those categories, that's a problem. Does that make sense? Just trying to make sure everybody's tracking with that. Okay. The what? No. I just want each image and or each drawing printed on a plain 11 by 17 sheet of paper. No bindings, nothing. Okay, just the 11 by 17s. We'll lay them all out on the back tables. I used to hang them up on the walls, but there's always so much stuff up that we'll lay them out on the back tables instead. And then I will collect all those 11 by 17s and I'll bind them together into a big book. I'll show you some of the books that I have from previous semesters, just as a record of what everybody's done. You will also need to post all of those. I will grade the posts, not the printed versions, because sometimes the laser printer prints don't look as good as the posts, especially in the night renders. So I will still grade the online versions. Okay, so today we're going to continue on with the line drawing strategy. Today we're going to do the section cuts to be able to create a section from your building. So I'm going to cut through that. We've already done a section cut and a rendering. We haven't done the line drawing part of this yet, but when we did the plan right before Thanksgiving break, it was essentially a section cut, but it was horizontal instead of vertical. So all the steps from the last class are almost identical, except the section plane goes in the opposite direction. So it should be a lot of repetition for what I'm going through today. As with last class, when we did the plan view, I have to make sure that I do a save as. So I have my master site file open. I'm going to do a file save as. And remember, I'm actually doing this in front of you to emphasize how important this is, because we will end up destroying the drawing along the way. So this is now going to be, I'm going to call this section 01. And I'll go ahead and click save. There we go. So now I have a save as. And so the first piece is really to decide, where do I want to cut the section through the building. And so the last one, I cut the section through the stairway going this direction. For lack of something better, I'll cut the section in the opposite direction so that you can see the building in the opposite direction. As I start to set this up, I'm going to go into my layers. I'm going to create a new layer called section. And I'll call it section 01. And then below that, on a sublayer, I'm going to create the section 01 plane. And this plane is just a really large horizontal plane that fully intersects with all of my objects. So let me create this vertical plane from there to there. Let me move it down a bit. And so that definitely intersects my whole drawing. I'm going to look at the top view and move this so that it is on top of my building. And then I have to decide where in the building do I want that section cut to occur. Remember, when you're doing this, that it's really important to figure out a good section cut. You just don't want to arbitrarily stick your section somewhere in the building. You want to think about what's happening in the building and what makes this particular piece of the building a valuable piece of the building to see in a section. So I'm going to cut right there. Let me go ahead and move back into my perspective view. And we get a sense that, yes, OK, I've cut through my building OK. I can zoom selected on block instance just so that I can orbit around that. Yeah, OK, it looks pretty good. Let's get a preview. I'm going to use the section tools command to do this, same as I've been doing. And when I do that, I'll go up to section tools and then create, or type stcreate. Objects to section, it's going to be all except for that big plane. So I hold down Control, deselect the plane. I'll hit Enter. I know that I want my solid mode to be set for surfaces, which it is. I need to know which axes, though, this time. It's going to be the Y axis instead of the X-axis. So we'll pick the Y-axis. The rest of these options are all fine. I'll hit Enter. And which direction am I cutting? It looks like it's already set to the correct direction, so that's good. So I'll snap right there to the top of this plane, and I'll hit Enter. And it then creates ST00 in this case. So I'm going to turn off the section plane, and I'm going to go to Section Tools, View. I'm going to pick ST00, and it's going to be in the Pool 01, because that's my active layer, Pool 01. And I'm going to zoom in here and take a look at how this cut worked. All right, so it turned out decent, but I do need to fill in some of the pieces of my building. So I'm going to create a new layer under Section 01 for wall fill. I'll make that active, and I'll go ahead and fill in the wall. And again, I apologize, but this unfortunately takes a little bit of time for me to do. There we go. A few more. Looks like I have a few issues in how these are intersecting. There we go. Let's do down here. All right, so all of those walls have filled in. I probably need to fill in below the building, so let's do a little bit more here. There we go. That's filled in now. And I also probably want a little bit more from my terrain here. Let me unlock the cThru layer for just a second so I can see these little curves. See if it's going to let me. There you go. That curve here, this curve right there, and this curve right there. And I'm going to copy all of those vertically, and we'll go straight down so that they're a little bit larger there. And then remember, I can select these and loft them together to create some fill regions. They just have to be below my building itself. So there's another one. And there's another one, and we can loft. Perfect. So those are all filled in. The idea there is that that becomes solid at the bottom of my section cut when I go to do it. The other thing that I'll want is to do a contour of this so that I can see all the little contour lines potentially in my line drawing. It can help. So I'm going to go ahead and on the section 01 layer, I'm going to do one more sublayer. We'll call this contours. I'll make it active. And I'm going to go ahead and contour. Base point we'll pick over here, and I'll do it vertically. There it is, at, we'll say, 2-foot intervals. Notice I failed to contour this piece, unfortunately. So I'll have to come back and contour that piece. Perfect. Come back to this. I'm going to repeat the contour. From the same point here, same distance, and there's those contours. Okay, so now I have all of those contours viewed. I'm going to go back into this view for a second. I've got some thickness applied. Go back to shaded there. All right, it looks pretty good. I'm ready to start setting up that final view. And so I'll save myself a little bit of time by going into one of the preset views. So I'm going to go to Set View, and I'm going to try the front view or the back view and see if I can get a view. That's not the front. It might be the right side. That's close to, let me go ahead and hide the water here a second. Yep, it's the back. Let me go back, Set View. Let me go to back here. No, it's the left. There we go. I'll zoom in on my building here. Say about like that. I'm going to save this view. So I'll go into my Set View, Named Views. And I'm going to save this view as my section 01. Go ahead and say OK. So now it's called section 01, and I can go back to it if I accidentally move around from this particular layer. So at this point, I'm ready to do the Make 2D of this view. So I'm going to go ahead and start the Make 2D command. So I've got my view set up. Oh, before I do that, I do want to get the rectangle for my view so that I can reference that point. So let me go into Set Camera and then Show Camera. Remember, I'm not going to see it in the section 00 layer. I'm going to see it in one of the other views. So let's go to the perspective view down here so we can take a look. And there's my camera. I'm going to go ahead and draw my rectangle. Remember, it's not a surface, it's just a regular rectangle. 3 points. I'll go from there to there to there. I'll select it and then scale from this corner by 2. There we go. That's set up. I can then move back into my section 0, 1 layer. I have that rectangle set up. Now I'll go in and make 2D. Oops. Make 2D. Select objects to draw. It's going to be all. I'll hit enter. I'll go ahead and hit enter again. And now I'm moving in. Now this is the big question. Do I maintain the source layers or do I not maintain the source layers? I think it's better long term if you maintain the source layers, but sometimes you can run into trouble or it doesn't want to do it. The other thing that can happen is if you have too many pieces of furniture with too many hidden lines or whatever, you may decide not to show your hidden lines, which makes the Make 2D a little bit easier. So that's an option. Certainly in a section view, the hidden lines aren't quite as important as an elevation view. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And this is going to start building the Make 2D. Remember, this can take a little bit of time. So while this is running, I'm going to pause. You guys can work for a little bit, and then I'll come back. I know you guys all have things to do, so I don't want to just keep your attention the whole time. OK, so it finished the Make 2D. I'm going to go ahead and double-click on my section, get back into my top view, and I'm going to see the Make 2D sitting over here. So remember, the only part that matters is the part that's inside the square. So I'll use that rectangle here as a trim. There we go. I'll type trim. We'll get rid of the stuff that's outside. And then I can go ahead and delete all this extra stuff because it doesn't matter. One more trim. There we go. All right. So now there's a lot of excess pieces in here, but I'm not going to worry about them too much. This is the drawing that I want to do the export on. So I'm going to move this whole drawing from where it is to 0, 0, 0 to get it to the actual origin. I'll zoom selected. I'm still in the top view. And from here, I'm going to go to File, Export Selected. And this is where I'm going to choose that Adobe Illustrator file. So there it is, Adobe Illustrator. I'm going to go into my options. If you're not getting the options, it's because you're not in the top view. So I am in the top view. 48:1, quarter scale drawing. The advantage here is that it's scaled. I'll go ahead and say OK. And then I'll click on, oh, I need to give it a name. So this is section 01. Put it into today's folder. There it is. And I'll go ahead and click Save. 48:1. Perfect. And then I can open up Illustrator and take a look at that. I'll go to File and then Open. And I'll go ahead and open up, wrong. There's my section 01. Go ahead and open it. Control minus to zoom out a little bit. Now I need to adjust that artboard. So on the left-hand side here, there's my artboard. And now the artboard is open. There we go. And set correctly for the size of my drawing. If I press Control 0, we can now see all of my line drawings. Remember, I get a messy layer stack because of the export. So I'm going to need a new layer for visible and a new layer for hidden. So I'll do visible first, And then I'm going to come through here and select everything that is visible. All right, so there's all the visible. We'll move that up onto the visible layer. And then we can minimize it. And then the rest of these are all hidden, if I did it correctly. So let me create a new layer, call that one hidden. Take all of these and put them on the hidden layer. And let's put the hidden layer below the visible layer in the stack. Now, all these hidden lines, I'm going to select them all. I'll click the little box over here so that I select everything. And we'll change them from being white to being black. Or actually, let's do like kind of a medium gray there. And then under my stroke, I'm going to change them to be 0.25. And I'm going to dash them at 2 by 1. If you're not seeing all of these options, you might have to click the flyout and click Show Options. There we go. Now I should be able to see them, and if we zoom in here a little bit, there they all are. I'll press Control 0 and zoom out. It's possible that I'm going to make a few other adjustments, like these horizontal lines probably need to be dashed as well, the contours. I'll come back and I'll do that a little bit. I also have a line here that goes all the way across my drawing that I don't think is particularly relevant. Likewise, this little piece needs to be deleted. That needs to be deleted because the contours would flow across all of it. So let me select those, deselect these, deselect these. Now I'll have to go through and make finer selections here. So there's always a little bit of cleanup. Okay, so I'm well on my way here toward analyzing this. This line here is important because it's the section cut. It's the part that I've actually cut through. So I'm not going to delete that particular piece just yet. For clarity purposes, I could delete the contours here. Well, I'm going to have to cut those off a little bit. We'll get to that in just a second when I bring it in. So now that I have this drawing partially done, I'm going to go over to, hey, if you guys are not listening to me, that's fine. But you guys have to be quiet enough so that everybody else can listen to me that wants to listen to me, OK? So just have some respect there. OK, so now I have this piece, and I'm going to switch back over into Rhino, and it's time to actually do the rendering part. So I'm going to do that clay rendering that I talked about before. Unfortunately, because I want the sun to be able to stream into my building, I'm going to have to do that big split. So first thing we'll do is I'll go back into my perspective view. I'm going to type clear all views so that everything is clear. And then I'm going to turn back on that large section plane. And so that it's a little easier to see, let me switch to shaded mode. There it is. I'm going to SEL block instance to select my block. I'll type explode. And it's going to explode out my block. We'll come back, SEL block instance, explode. Deselect SEL block instance, and I'm just keep going. Explode. SEL block instance, explode. SEL block instance. OK, I've gotten all of them. They're all exploded. Now it's time to do the split. So I'm going to type split. Select objects to split. It's going to be everything. So I could actually type all here, except for that big plane. So I hold down Control and deselect it. I'll go ahead and hit Enter. Select cutting objects. It's going to be that big plane. And I'll go ahead and hit Enter again. Now, same thing here. It takes a little bit of time to run through all of the objects. So I'll go ahead and pause for a bit, and then I'll come back and keep going. OK, so the split's done. I'm going to go ahead and turn off that big plane. And then I want to look in a view that makes my selection easy. So in the front view here, it's hard to select that front half of the building. So I'm instead going to switch to the back view. So I'll go to Set View and then Back. There we go. Now it'll be easy to select this front half right there. So I'll get in there nice and tight, and I've selected the front half. This piece that goes over is a rectangular light as part of it. So it's not the end of the world that that rectangular light's there. Obviously that didn't split. May have a few issues with those pieces, but again, I'm not overly worried about it. OK, so I have all of those selected. Now it's time to apply the see-through material to those objects. So I'll go into my V-Ray materials, and I'm going to make sure I load the see-through material. So let me go into my resources here, V-Ray, Special Materials, see-through. There it is. But before I actually apply it, remember I want to turn off all of the glass. So I'll go through here and I'll deselect anything that is glass. So bear with me for just a second. We don't worry about the Make 2D. Here we go. So glass railing's going to go off. The window glass is going to go off. That window glass is going to go off. And I think that's all of it. So that's deselected. I'll go back to my V-Ray material editor, and I'm going to apply that see-through material. So I'll right-click and say Apply Material to Selection, because I'm overwriting the existing materials. Perfect. That's now applied. Now when I turn on the glass layers again, as I turn them on, I'm going to right-click and say Select Objects. Turn this one on, Select Objects. Turn this one on and Select Objects. Now here, I don't want the stuff that's in the back half of the building. So I'll switch my view, Set View, back to the front to make selecting it easy. And then I'll hold down Control to deselect everything that is not cut by that section plane. All of that's selected. I need a basic transparent material. So I'll right-click on Scene Materials, Create Material, Standard. And I'm going to call this Transparent. And I will change the transparency of this material to be white, which means that it's fully transparent. And I'll right-click and say Apply Material to Selection. So now I have that on there as well. So now it's essentially close to be ready to render. But in this instance, it would be a full color rendering, because I haven't changed the rest of it to be clay, because it still has the original materials on it. So I'm going to work my way through the back half of this building. So this time we'll select all of this there. And I want all of this to have just kind of a basic plain material on it. So once again, I'll go through and deselect the glass. There it is. All of those are deselected. I'll go and create in my V-Ray materials just a plain gray material. So I'll go to Create Material, Standard, and we can call this Clay. And I'll change it to be kind of a light gray color. I'll right-click on Clay and say Apply Material to Selection to overwrite the materials. And then I'm not going to apply the glass, anything to the glass, because I want those to appear as glass in my building render. So at this point, I have everything set up and ready to render. So let me move this view. Let me go ahead and say Set View. And we're going to go to Section 01 to make sure I didn't move it somehow. ST Clear All Views. Actually, I could leave it on. It doesn't matter whether I've cleared the views or not, because the rendering is going to show it as clear. I should apply on my section layer. My wall fill probably needs a material. So let me go ahead and apply. Here, it's easier if we go into V-Ray Material Editor. I'm going to go ahead and apply my clay to that as well. I'll right-click and say Apply Material to Layer. And the wall, let's see, where is it? It's called Wall Fill. If I can find it. Wall Fill. There we go. So now it has clay applied to it as well. So this is then ready to start the render. So the sun is on. Let's go ahead and give it a render. Remember, it's always useful to start out a little bit small. Let me go to V-Ray options here. I'm going to go into output. I'm going to make sure that I get the exact view aspect and then relock it. And we'll start it as a very small render just to confirm it's going to come out the way we want. Go ahead and render. Yep, seems pretty reasonable. Something's up with the background back here. I'm not quite sure why that's not turning out. Probably means that whatever my background HDRI isn't loaded correctly. I can go into V-Ray, into my options, and I could change the environment background color. Maybe. Here, I could say, no, I no longer want it to be a bitmap. I instead just want it to be white. Take this back to 1. And we could do another test render. And this should then turn to white. Now, it still doesn't like me, so we'll have to do some cleanup later on. OK, so the render looks pretty good. So at this point, I'll go ahead and I'm going to render, but in a higher resolution. So I'll go into my V-Ray options, and I'm going to bump up the width and the height of this quite a lot. So we'll say maybe 3000. And then I'll go ahead and render it. This is going to take a little bit of time. So I'll go ahead and pause, let you guys work for a little bit, and then I'll come back and show you the final assembly of these once they go back together. In the meantime, I am going to open up Illustrator and start to tweak a few things to get it ready for the file. Okay? Okay, so it went ahead and finished its render. The inside might be a little dark, but I'll post-process that in Photoshop, in Illustrator just a little bit. Couple things to keep in mind. Because we did the building the way it was, the full shadow of the building is cast, which is what we want. Furthermore, these lights and little reflections on the wall are accurate as if the whole building were there. So that's one of the key things to keep in mind in this, and it does make a big difference. I'm going to go ahead and save this, but I will save all my channels. Remember that things like the alpha channel might be useful down the road because they're showing what the transparency is. So this is an easy mask in Photoshop to fix things down the road. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the RGB color, and then I'll go ahead and save all the image channels. And we'll put it into today's folder. This is clay of section 01. And I'll click Save. I'll go over into Illustrator here. The big things that I cleaned up were just some additional lines. I made my contours dotted so they weren't quite so stark. So now I want to bring in that background image. So I'm going to create a new layer. We'll call this clay. I'll move it at the bottom of the layer stack, making sure it's selected. I'll go to File and then Place, and I'll drop in that clay section. There it is. It's a little bit large, so we'll have to drop it down. Remember, as you're scaling it, I'll use my free transform. I can hold down Shift to maintain proportions. Once I know that it is, in fact, the correct proportions, sometimes it's easier to actually just drag from the side because it'll snap nice and even, and drag all 4 sides. If you did this correctly, it should line up perfect. Okay? I'll press Control-0 so that I can see everything. Yeah, it looks like it lined up quite nicely. And because of how I did the rendering, it already filled in a lot of the section for me, which is nice. I didn't have to go in and do a bunch of fills, though it is something that's possible in Illustrator afterward. In the interest of showing you that, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to fill this in so you can manually control what's being filled in. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this visible layer so that I can do a live paint of this layer. So I'm going to go to the little flyout menu here. I'll say duplicate visible, I hope. Oh, how nice. It doesn't want to let me do it. Probably because there's so many nested objects or something along those lines. So we'll just have to do it manually. I'm going to go ahead and select everything. There it is. I'm going to turn off hidden so that the hidden isn't part of this selection. And then I'll go ahead and go into the live paint. Actually, before I click the live paint tool, I'll go to Object, Live Paint, and then Make. I'll say OK. It's now made a live paint group out of this object. And I can then fill in using the Live Paint Bucket tool, which is underneath the Shape Builder tool. There it is. And I'll fill in with black the regions that I've cut through. Oh, come on. Not white, black. There we go. And so I'll fill in the parts of the building that I've cut through. So like that. There. Sometimes you have to zoom in a little bit to get the rest of these. And there's some other little details like these little windows that I cut through. I need to fill those in. There's a little piece, oops. There's a little piece of trim right there that needs it. A little piece of trim. So you have to pay a little attention to where various pieces are so that you can make sure you get them all filled in. That would be filled in. That would be filled in. Okay. It's not registering and letting me fill this piece in because I don't have a border around my overall object. So if I zoom out for a second and create a rectangle that goes all the way around my objects, like that, we'll flip it so that it's just a line that goes around them. Right now, that object that I just created is not part of the live paint group, but I want it to be. So if I reselect all the objects, again, hidden is off. I can go to Object, Live Paint, Merge, which brings the other object in. And now I will be able to go back to my live paint and paint these pieces in as well, if I can get it to paint with black. There we go. So I can fill in that part of the section cut as well. So this is starting to read a little bit more like a section cut because I filled those pieces in. When I'm done filling in all of these pieces, whatever I've cut through, I'll click the Expand button, which breaks those pieces out. Then I'll use the white arrow, the direct select, to select one of those pieces. We'll say that piece. Then I can go back to the Select menu and say Select Same Fill Color, which gives me all those black filled objects. And I'm going to move them onto their own layer called Wall Fill. There's Wall Fill. We'll move that up top. That conveniently puts all of those objects on top of everything else. The one other thing that maybe I should have filled in was the sky. That would have been a good place to do that because remember on my clay render, the sky is too dark. So let me go ahead and go back. And I'm going to live paint again. I want to live paint with white this time. For clarity purposes, I'll live paint with the color, and then you can see. So there it is in turquoise. Direct select. Oh, wait. There we go. Expand. Now I can pick it. And let me put it on the sky layer. We'll call this sky, not sly, sky. There we go. Put that onto that layer. Move that up on top of everything else. And so now when I turn on the clay render, you see just the sky. Obviously, I don't want the sky to be that turquoise, so I can change that back to white. Or I could even choose some kind of a light gray. Looks like I missed the those little pieces in there too. So in that case, let me back up a couple steps. Back into my live paint. And I should have been painting in those pieces as well. But in that context, I would need my hidden on because it's only that upper portion. So let's select all, Object, Live Paint, Merge. And now I should be able to paint in those sections right there as well. I'll deselect, expand, select, same fill color. There's all of that. I can then move that up onto the sky layer. Turn everything else off for just a second so you can see it. There it is. We'll take these objects here, and I'm going to change them to white. And those essentially will mask off the dark clay backgrounds. If I could get it to turn white correctly. There we go. There's white. The other option would be to fix it in Photoshop, which I'm just trying to show you all of it in Illustrator. I think it would be a lot easier to fix it in Photoshop, personally. But so now I have that back. We'll go ahead and turn back on my various lines here. We'll turn back on my wall fills. And now I can press Control-0, and we can start to see this as an overall composition. A couple things that I might want to do. I might want to lower the opacity of the clay render itself because it's still showing up a little bit dark. I can select it, go into my opacity, and drop that to maybe 50%. Now it's not nearly so overpowering. It reads a lot better, reads a lot clearer, and I can start to see this as a line drawing. Okay? So that's creating a section. Remember, you get the accurate shadows as part of this, which is a big advantage of doing this from your Rhino file. But the other thing that's important to recognize is we've now gone through elevation, plan, and section drawings from your Rhino model. So if you spend a lot of time creating a good, high-quality Rhino model, you can get these views relatively easily out of it. Obviously, it's going to take you guys a little longer than it just took me to do this because I've done it a lot more times than you have. But if you get good at this, you can very quickly generate a pretty decent looking line drawing with a lot of detail without too much extra work. I didn't take it into AutoCAD, right? It's just a little bit of tweaking, and filling in the sections make this relatively easy. But if I wanted to make it a little bit finer quality, I could come in and like these glass pieces, I could really fine tune those line weights so they're not so thick, and it would read that much better. Those are usually available, and part of the reason I do this is in the as one of these layers. If you go through and find it, one of these slender window, probably window glass, one of these in here somewhere, is probably the I don't know, I can't find them right now, but it's probably one of those glass, and it would be relatively easy to select it and go from there. Okay? So hopefully that kind of helps get you the full gamut of how you get line drawings out of Rhino. Remember, you're going to need to do 2 as part of your final. The choice is up to you. So it could be elevation plan, it could be plan section, it could be section elevation. It's up to you. If you do all 3, great, but it's not required. All right?
Specific layout that you're looking for?
What?
On the paper. Oh, you said one each, one per paper.
Oh, yeah, one per paper as part of it. Question?
How can you put a sky, like an actual like clouds and like the atmosphere in the back?
In the back? Sure. Okay, so in this particular context, I created the white, I did a live paint and I created that white object. I can use that object as a clipping mask and bring in sky. So that's one way, and I'll do it. I'm just talking you through the concept. First option would be to do it in Illustrator like that. The second option would be to go back to my Photoshop file and put it in there. So either way is acceptable. It's just a matter of your choice. So in this context, I have my object that is the sky. There it is listed. The only problem with that is that they're individual paths, so they need to be made into one compound path. So let me select all of the objects. I'll go to Object, Compound Path, Make. It makes them into one compound path. Then I need to place in the sky wherever it is. So bear with me for a second. Let me see if I can find a sky. Okay, so there's my cloudy sky. Let me zoom out a little bit here. Obviously, this needs to get a little bit smaller. Okay, so we'll say that for now. I have the compound path needs to be above on this layer. So compound path image. Then on the sky layer itself, I'm going to click on the flyout menu and say make clipping mask. And it will then clip the sky for that particular object. So that's how you would do it in Illustrator. The other option would be to open the clay render in Photoshop. So if I go back here to today's folder, fall, there it is. There's my clay render. We'll open that in Photoshop. So there it is. I want to make this upper part sky. It's just a matter of bringing in the sky. So I'll go to File and then Place. And you're going to make me find my sky again. There it is. Control minus to zoom out a little bit. I need to increase the size so that that covers up my drawing. There we go. And using the background as my selection, I'm going to magic wand this plus this, this, this. On my sky here, I'm going to say add layer mask. And it's going to cut out the sky there. So depending on which way you're more comfortable with, you could do it in either capacity. The nice thing about doing a little bit of touch-up in Photoshop is you can do all the Photoshop techniques really quickly and get it ready, and then it's just a matter of saving it. Remember also in this, however, so that's the easiest way. Let me show you one other wrinkle. And I'm speaking basically to the 4 of you that are watching. It is what it is. OK, so let's say that I didn't create that with the magic wand tool. So I went back to this step. Remember that I created, when I did the rendering, the alpha channel. Oops. So if I come back in here, and I'm actually going to open the alpha channel. I'm not going to place the alpha channel. I'm going to open the alpha channel. Let me go into today's lecture here. So there was my alpha. I'm going to take that alpha channel, and I'm going to open it. And what the alpha channel does is, and you might not be able to see this as easily in this view, but the black is black, but this is kind of a dark gray, not a true black, because there's some transparency in that piece of glass. So this will help me do the glass. It might not be that noticeable, but there is a subtle difference. And the more layers you have of this, glass on glass, it can make a difference. So I'm going to select this whole image and then go to Edit and then Copy. So I have it copied. I'll go into my selection here. I'm going to add a layer mask. It's just white. But I want to use that alpha channel as the layer mask. The only way to paste into a layer mask, and this is a Photoshop quirk, is I actually have to go into the channels, and I have to turn everything else off and turn on the layer mask. There it is. Then I can go to Edit and then Paste. There it is. We can turn everything back on, go back over to my layers, turn it back on. See how it now has that layer mask applied to it? When we switch over, sorry, like this, I did it backwards. Let me select it. I'll right-click and say, oh, sorry. Let me select the layer mask, Image, Adjustments, Invert. There we go. And now you can see it with that. It's probably not too noticeable, but it's a subtle difference. And part of the reason I wanted to show you that is that's why all of these channels can make a big difference, because I didn't have to do any selection. V-Ray already did it for me. And it's just a matter of knowing how to drop them in. The Z-depth is something that we're going to talk a little bit more about down the road. I'll do a special lecture on Z-depth, because you'll be amazed at what you can do with that particular channel. So I'll show you that stuff a little bit later on. So whether you choose to do it in Photoshop and save it, or whether you choose to do it in Illustrator the way I did it here, essentially the results are very, very similar. It's just a matter of which one's more comfortable and which one seems easier. My guess is that the Photoshop's easier, but that's up to you guys. Any other awesome questions like that can get me off on tangents? No? OK, I'll turn you guys loose.